So being a part of a conversation helps you engage a community at a level where they are. So that's the second way to be more creative. The third way to be more creative is to create a compelling identity. Now, identity drives all human behaviour. Every decision a human being makes is driven by identity. Now, behavioural theory was basically started by Blaise Pascal in the 1600s, and he worked with decision theory. Basically, his theory was human beings look at all the available options, weigh up the pros and cons, and then human beings, get this, make the most logical decision possible. How many people here think they make decisions that way? Yeah, exactly. And then people like Daniel Goleman came along and said, no, it's not about IQ, it's about EQ. People make emotional decisions. And he's right. You know, almost everything we do is filtered through what we feel. So we need to be conscious of emotional decisions as well. And people started saying, well, hang on, what's the most important emotion then? What's the most important question we can answer? And people like Simon Sinek came along and said, well, it's all about why. Why drives how, which determines what. Viktor Frankl said the same thing 50 years earlier in Man's Search for Meaning. With a big enough why, you can achieve any what. The problem is, why is often temporary. Anyone who's ever been on a diet knows what I'm talking about. You know, if you've got a big enough why, you can lose the weight. Maybe you've got a school reunion or a wedding or a hot date coming up. You start eating lettuce, you get on the treadmill, you lose the weight and you look fabulous. But then what happens when the why goes by? 6 months later, you're back on the sofa in your tracksuit pants eating chicken out of a bucket. Because at some point you realise you are the fat one off the Gruen transfer. And your identity pulls you back to who you think you are. So identity drives all the decisions that we make. And people use brands to define who they are. They use the organisations they interact with. They use the shows that they go and see to define who they are as people. There are children in the United States with names like Mercedes and Lexus, and they need your help. You know, so we use brands to define who we are. People don't say, I use Macintosh software. I use the Macintosh operating system. They say, I'm a Mac. They want to say, I'm a crazy one, I'm a misfit, I'm a rebel, I'm a round peg in a square hole. But mostly they want to say, I'm not a PC. Because having an identity that challenges your identity, that doesn't reflect well on you, is actually a real problem. If you haven't got an identity that people want to associate with, it's going to be really hard for you to engage a community. You know, Fantastic Furniture actually makes some reasonable furniture. It's cheap furniture, but it's reasonable. The problem is their identity. When people buy Fantastic Furniture, they actually